a dusty Missouri gas station, a black woman fueling her car, and a racist deputy who thinks she's powerless. In less than 3 minutes, he shoves her, kicks her to the ground, and laughs. But what he doesn't know, she's the FBI chief, and the storm she's about to unleash will tear his entire world apart. Before we continue this powerful story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another powerful story you won't want to miss. The road stretched out before her, long and empty, cutting through fields that hadn't seen rain in weeks. Dust rose behind Camila Brooks's black Yusur, swirling like a restless ghost against the pale Missouri sky. She kept her sunglasses on, partly to block the sun's glare, partly to hide the weariness in her eyes. No badge today, no convoy of agents or flashing lights. Just her, a woman in jeans and a gray jacket, blending in with the world that so often looked past her. It had been a long drive from the last town, and the silence of the road gave her too much time to think about the cases she'd cracked, about the ones that still haunted her. Drug rings dismantled, human traffickers behind bars, corrupt officials exposed. Victories stacked up on paper, but in her chest they felt like scars more than trophies. This drive wasn't about a mission. It was supposed to be quiet, a break before the next storm. But something in the air told her storms didn't wait for permission. The trees lining the roadside gave way to cracked farmland and forgotten signs pointing to towns too small to be on most maps. This was the Midwest she knew well, not the postcard version with friendly diners and Friday night football, but the quieter places. Places where power wore a badge and no one asked questions when it flexed. Camila adjusted her grip on the wheel, passing a weather-beaten church whose sign read, "God sees all, even in the dark." She gave a half-mile. If only the law did the same. Her GPS crackled, losing signal as she neared Benton County. No surprise there. She'd memorized the map anyway. Route 24 cut through the county like a scar, leading to a stretch of 2-lane blacktop where a gas station stood alone against the horizon. The tank was nearly empty, and even though every instinct told her to keep driving, she pulled in. Better to refuel here than run dry where no help would come. The lot was nearly deserted, save for an old pickup with peeling paint and country music humming softly through cracked windows. A lazy buzz of cicadas filled the air, thick and slow like the heat pressing down from above. Camila parked beside Pump 3, cut the engine, and let the quiet settle. For a moment, it was just her and the wind rustling the brittle trees. Just another traveler in a nowhere town. That's what she wanted to be today. Invisible, ordinary. But even as she stepped out and stretched her back, she knew nothing. Some people never got to be ordinary. The smell of gasoline mixed with dust and pine as she unscrewed the gas cap. She slid her credit card into the pump, the old machine beeping to life, a brief flicker of normalcy. Fueling up, heading home. But the stillness carried something else too. A tension she couldn't name yet but could feel in her bones. Years in the field had taught her how to read quiet places. Quiet wasn't safety. Quiet was the bold swallowing. She started filling the tank, her back to the road, sunglasses shielding her gaze from the horizon. That's when she heard it. The slow, deliberate crunch of gravel. Not the random thud of tires, but the careful roll of someone meaning to be seen. She didn't turn right away. Didn't need to. She already knew. Authority had arrived, and trouble had followed close behind. The gravel crunched louder, each step deliberate, heavy and slow. Camila glanced at her side mirror. A sheriff's cruiser, Benton County, dulled by dust and sun, eased into the lot. Its blue and white paint peeled at the corners like an old lie barely holding together. She inhaled slowly, keeping her shoulders loose. There were a dozen ways this could play out, and none of them felt right. The driver's door opened with a creak that cut through the heat. Out stepped Deputy Kyle Riker. Mid-40s sat, thick arms beneath a tan short-sleeve uniform, buzz cut sharp against his pale scalp, mirrored sunglasses, hiding eyes that didn't know how to look without judging. He carried himself like the lot was his front porch, and anyone standing in it without his permission was trespassing. Power radiated. By him, not the kind earned by trust, but the kind taken by... He stopped, just a few feet from her pump, hands on hips, boots planted wide. His presence sucked the air out of the lot. "You lost, ma'am." His voice dragged like gravel, too loud for such a quiet place. It wasn't a question, it was a warning. Camila didn't turn immediately. She finished securing the gas cap, placed the nozzle back in its cradle, then faced him with measured calm. She kept her hands visible, palms open. Years of training pressed down on her instinct to challenge him. "Not here. Not yet. Deputy. Just getting gas on my way through." Her tone was firm but polite. Nothing to provoke, nothing to back down from either. Riker's gaze slid over her like a scan, lingering on the SUV's clean lines and out-of-state plates. A black woman, alone, driving a government-issued black SUV through his jurisdiction. He smelled what he thought was trouble, and he was ready to stomp it out before it said a word. "Don't get many folks like you stopping here," he said, a smirk curling under his sunglasses. "Especially not with plates like that." His words didn't leave much room for misunderstanding. Camila kept her face steady, though inside something tightened. She'd been here before, in other towns, other uniforms, same script, but knowing the playbook didn't make it any less dangerous. "Didn't realize fuel was restricted by zip code," she answered evenly. Riker took a step closer, boots scraping the gravel. Now she could see the sweat on his mouth, the twitch at the corner of his mouth. He was enjoying this, the power, the game, but he didn't know the rules had already changed. "License," he barked, holding out his hand. Camila paused. For a moment, she considered flashing her badge, ending this before it got worse. But something told her to wait, to see how far he would go, how deep the rot ran. She reached slowly into her jacket, movements deliberate, and pulled out her driver's license. Not her badge, not yet. Riker snatched it from her fingers like she was handing him contraband. He didn't even glance at it before speaking again. "And your reason for being in Benton?" His voice dropped lower, heavier now. Less of a question, more of an accusation. Camila met his gaze squarely, calm as still water. "Passing through, getting gas, that's all." But in Kyle Riker's world, a black woman in an expensive SUV wasn't just passing through. In his mind, she was hiding something, and he was going to find it, whether it was there or not. Riker stepped in closer, invading her space, his chest puffed like he was the law itself. The sunlight glinted off his badge, but it didn't shine nearly as bright as his arrogance. Camila held her ground, hands still, breathing even, but inside, she felt the first flickers of anger tighten in her chest. "You got an attitude, Miss Brooks," Riker sneered, reading her name from the license like it was a dirty word. "I don't like that." His voice dropped lower, colder, a warning wrapped in false authority. She said nothing. Silence, she knew, was sometimes sharper than words. But silence didn't save her. Riker took another step and slammed his palm against the hood of her SUV, making the metal ring out across the empty lot. The cicadas fell quiet. The whole world felt like it was holding its breath. Then came the crack of gravel as he leaned into the open passenger door. Without permission, without a warrant, without cause, he started rifling through her glove box, tossing receipts, spare sunglasses, even a half-eaten protein bar, like they were evidence of a crime only he could see. Her pulse quickened, but she stayed where she was. Survive first, respond later. "Registration's in there," she said, her voice steady but clipped. "Top folder." Riker found it, crumpled it in his fist, and turned back toward her, his smirk deepening. What she saw in his eyes wasn't confusion, it was certainty. Certainty that no one would stop him. Certainty that this would end like all the others, with him in control. But what he didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that the woman standing in front of him wasn't a victim. She was the storm he never saw coming. The heat settled over the gas station like a thick blanket as Riker stared her down. shifting his weight from one boot to the other. Camila could feel the moment stretching thin, ready to snap. He glanced at the license again, as if reading her name gave him the right to decide whether she belonged here or not. His voice sliced through the air, sharp and deliberate. "Camila Brooks," he drawled, "what brings a woman like you to a town like this?" She kept her tone measured, her hands still where he could see them. "I already told you, Deputy. I'm passing through, stopping for gas." But that wasn't enough for him. He took a step closer, the gravel crunching under his boots, cutting the distance until she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "See, we don't get many strangers around here driving shiny black SUVs with tinted windows and big city plates. Makes folks nervous." Her fingers twitched slightly, a flash of irritation she forced back down. This wasn't her first time dealing with men like him. Men who wore their insecurity like a badge of honor, who turned suspicion into sport. But still, it burned. "I'm not a threat, Deputy," she said quietly, calmly. "Just a traveler, like anyone else." But he wasn't listening. He was circling her now, slow and deliberate, like a predator sizing up his prey. His gaze crawled over the SUV, then back to her. "You from St. Louis? Chicago? Detroit, maybe?" Each city dripped from his lips like an accusation. "What's a woman like you doing out here alone?" The air tightened between them. Camila knew this wasn't about the law. This was about power, his need to remind her who owned this stretch of gravel, this cracked pump, this forgotten corner of Missouri. "Getting gas, Deputy, nothing more," she repeated, her voice steady. But her calm only seemed to agitate him further. His eyes darkened beneath his sunglasses, his tone sharpening like a blade. "You think you're better than me," he spat, stepping close enough that his badge nearly brushed her jacket. "Think you can stroll into my county and tell me how things work?" Her jaw clenched, but she didn't back down. "I didn't tell you anything, Deputy. I answered your questions. That's all." And for a brief second, just a flicker of time, something passed between them. A line drawn in the dust, waiting to be crossed. Riker smiled then, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man who knew he was about to take what he wanted. No badge flash, no backup, no witnesses, or so he thought. Just him and a woman he thought was alone. And that's when the storm truly began. Without warning, Riker's hand shot out and snatched her license from his pocket. He looked at it one more time, sneered, and flicked it toward the ground like it was trash. The thin plastic hit the dirt, landing face down in the gravel. The message was clear. She wasn't worth respect. Camila inhaled sharply but didn't move to pick it up. Not yet. He wanted a reaction. He was baiting her. Instead, she kept her gaze steady, locking eyes with him. Calm, unreadable. But Riker wasn't done. He stalked toward the SUV and yanked open the passenger side door without permission. The hinges groaned in protest. Without a warrant, without probable cause, without even a sliver of justification, he dove headfirst into her glove box, tossing items onto the seat and floor. Loose papers scattered. A pair of sunglasses hit the dash. A half-eaten protein bar bounced onto the floor mat. "You travelin' light, huh?" he mocked, his voice echoing in the hollow of the vehicle. "Bet you got all kinds of secrets tucked away in here." His hands rummaged deeper, rough and careless. Her pulse hammered in her ears, but her training held firm. She spoke evenly, her voice sharp but professional. "Deputy, I'm informing you that this is an unlawful search. My registration is in the top folder of that compartment. You've already violated protocol." But Riker didn't care about protocol. He wasn't here for the law. He was here for dominance. He straightened from the vehicle, clutching her registration like it was a confession of guilt, crumpled it in one meaty fist, and let it fall to the ground next to her license. His eyes found hers again, colder now, harder. "What you gonna do about it?" he challenged, stepping closer, his chest puffed. Camila didn't flinch. "I'll be filing a formal complaint." For a second, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, Then it twisted into something worse. Rage. Without a word, he shoved her. Hard. The force of it hit her square in the shoulder, sending her stumbling back against the side of the SUV. The metal frame caught her ribs, knocking the wind from her lungs. She gasped, steadying herself with one hand on the door handle. Pain shot through her side, but she forced herself to stand upright. That, she said, breathless but firm, was unnecessary force. But Riker only smirked, pleased with himself, pleased with the quiet lot, the dusty road, and what he thought was his kingdom. And Camila knew, in that moment, that showing her badge would have done nothing. He didn't care who she was, only what she looked like. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't begin to imagine, was who he had just laid his hands on, and what would happen next. The air was thick, pressing against her skin as Camila steadied herself. Her ribs ached where the SUV frame caught her, but her mind stayed sharp. She thought maybe, just maybe, he would stop there. Maybe his petty show of power was enough. But then, with no warning, he raised his boot, and before she could react, before a single word could leave her mouth, he drove it forward and slammed it into her shin, hard. The crack of bone against bone echoed across the empty lot like a gunshot. Camila cried out despite herself, the pain white-hot and immediate. Her leg gave out, buckling beneath her, and she dropped to the gravel, hands scraping against the sharp stones. The fuel pump clanked behind her, still dripping gas onto the ground, forgotten in the chaos. Dust rose around her as she hit the dirt, but she didn't stay down. Across the lot, frozen in place beside a stack of soda crates, a teenage boy stood clutching his phone. He had been unloading cases for the gas station's tiny market when he heard the first shout. His hands trembled, his breath shallow, but instinct had taken over. The phone's camera was already rolling. It captured everything: Riker's shove, the violent kick, Camila's fall, every cruel second of it. Riker didn't even notice the boy. Or maybe he didn't care. He stood over Camila now, towering, smirking, wiping the sweat from his brow like he had just finished a chore. "That's where you belong," he said coldly. "Stay down." Those words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. And then, without a second glance, he turned, climbed back into his cruiser, slammed the door, and revved the engine like he was proud of the mess he'd left behind. The tires spun out, spitting gravel behind him as he peeled away from the lot, disappearing down the road as if none of it ever happened. But something did happen, and it was still happening. Camila pushed her palms against the gravel, forcing herself up. Her knees screamed in protest, her shin already swelling beneath torn denim. Blood seeped through the rip in her jeans, but she rose anyway, shaking, breathing hard, but standing. Across the lot, the teenager lowered his phone, wide-eyed. He had captured something he didn't fully understand yet, but deep down he knew it mattered. Camila turned toward him, her voice low but clear. "Send that footage to the news," she said, "to everyone." The boy blinked, then nodded, slowly at first, then with growing certainty. As she limped back toward her SUV, each step sharp with pain, she knew one truth more clearly than anything else. Deputy Kyle Riker thought he had silenced a stranger. What he didn't realize was that he had just started a storm he couldn't outrun. And by the time it hit, it wouldn't just destroy him. It would burn down everything protecting him too. The gravel beneath her palms bit into her skin, sharp and unforgiving. Camila took one slow, steady breath and began to rise. The pain in her shin burned like fire. Her ribs ached from the earlier shove, and her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve hardened. She wasn't going to let a man like Riker write the end of her story. Not here. Not today. Her knee protested as she stood fully upright, wiping the dirt from her palms onto her jeans. Blood stained the torn fabric, the cut already swelling beneath it. But she didn't grimace. She didn't curse. She didn't collapse. Instead, she turned her head slowly, scanning the lot. The teenage boy was still standing there, watching her like she was something out of a story he never thought he'd witness. His phone lowered slightly, his face pale but focused. She gave him a quiet nod of thanks, simple but powerful. He had captured the truth, and the truth was about to move faster than any sheriff's cruiser could chase. Camila bent carefully, picking her ID out of the dirt where Riker had tossed it. She brushed the gravel from its face, staring for a moment at the name embossed in clean, federal type, Camila Brooks. She was more than what that deputy saw. She had fought too hard, risen too far, to be reduced to just another ma'am on the side of the road. The SUV still hummed quietly behind her, the gas pump long since clicked off. She replaced the nozzle, closed the gas cap, and leaned against the driver's door for a moment. Pain radiated through her leg, but she didn't let it slow her down. Reaching into her jacket, she pulled out her phone. A secure line blinked to life with one swipe. No hesitation, no doubt. "Olson," she said, when the call connected. "Director of Ops, I need you on, now." The voice on the other end answered fast, alert. "Cam, you all right?" She paused, just long enough for the truth to settle between them. "Assaulted, Benton County. Deputy Kyle Riker. Unprovoked contact, illegal search, and battery." The line went silent for half a heartbeat, then crackled with urgency. "Understood. Full file pull on Riker?" "Immediately," she confirmed, her voice sharp as steel. "I want every disciplinary report, partner log, and IA complaint. Flag any sealed records. I want it all." Olson's voice shifted from concern to mission mode. "On it now. We'll scrub the database and hit the regional logs. ETA 20 minutes for a full briefing." Camila took a shallow breath, the weight of years in law enforcement pressing against her chest. "And get me Benton County Sheriff Linda Calkins's personnel file. If this deputy's dirty, he didn't bury it alone." "Copy that," Olson responded, already typing. She ended the call, sliding the phone back into her pocket with fingers that didn't quite stop shaking. The pain was real, but the fight had already begun. In that quiet Missouri lot, surrounded by dust and silence, the wheels of federal justice had started to turn. And this time, they wouldn't stop until the whole house came down. Camila eased herself into the driver's seat, careful of her injured leg. The leather seat, warm from the afternoon sun, pressed against her back as she gathered her thoughts. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the weight of the last 10 minutes settle in her bones. The assault, the shove, the kick, those were surface wounds. What mattered now was the rot beneath it all, the system that allowed men like Riker to thrive without fear of consequence. Her phone buzzed again, shaking against the cup holder. This time, it was a secure alert from the FBI's internal misconduct tracking system. A preliminary search was complete. She tapped the screen, scanning the results through sharp, narrowed eyes. Kyle Riker, 6 years on the force. 4 internal complaints for excessive force, all dismissed. 2 pending civil suits, and 1 prior use of force incident involving a Latino teenager, closed without follow-up. Every file stamped with the same phrase, "No disciplinary action warranted." It was worse than she thought, and she'd seen plenty. She flicked through the files, noting a familiar name at the bottom of each dismissal report: Sheriff Linda Calkins, the gatekeeper, the protector of the rot. Every complaint died at her desk. Camila tightened her grip on the phone. The pattern was clear. This wasn't negligence, it was protection. Riker wasn't just a bad apple. He was cultivated, shielded, fed by a culture that rewarded his abuse of power. A soft ping alerted her to a new message from Olson. Geofence alert triggered. Civilian recording detected. Uploading social scrape now. Her pulse spiked. The boy with the phone. The footage was already moving. She opened the link Olson sent. A shaky but clear video began to play, captured from across the lot. Riker's shove, his unlawful search, and then the brutal kick that sent her crashing to the ground. Her chest tightened as she watched it play out from the outside. It was raw, unfiltered, unmistakable. The post already had a few dozen views, a local community page, captioned simply, "Sheriff's deputy beats black woman at gas station. No reason." It was starting. The fire that Riker had lit with his boot. And soon, it wouldn't be just Benton County watching. Camila didn't hesitate. She hit forward on the video link, sending it to the FBI's Media Monitoring Unit, to Civil Rights Division leads, and to 2 trusted journalists who'd been waiting for a story like this. Then she picked up the phone and dialed Marcus Ellington, her most trusted partner, head of intelligence coordination. He answered on the first ring. "Cam?" "It started," she said, voice steady despite the pain. "Ye okay?" "Physically, I'll manage. But Benton's worse than we thought. I need full surveillance pulls on the sheriff's office, the county commission, and every deputy partnered with Riker in the last 2 years." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'll move the teams now. You want federal review or shadow ops?" "Both," Camila said, her voice low. "And tell legal to prep civil rights charges. I'm filing them myself." For the first time in hours, she allowed herself a small, sharp smile. The fight was on. Camila sat in the driver's seat for a moment longer, letting the weight of the moment settle over her. The low hum of the engine filled the silence, steady as her breath. She opened her laptop on the passenger seat and connected through the bureau's secure line. There was no time to wait for normal channels. This was a battlefield, and she was moving first. She typed rapidly, pulling up the last 5 years of Benton County patrol logs, traffic stop patterns, and body cam audit trails. What she saw confirmed what she already knew. Complaints against Riker weren't isolated. They were part of a larger pattern of stops disproportionately targeting black drivers, migrant farm workers, and travelers with out-of-county snooties. Dozens of complaints vanished in the sheriff's office, wiped clean before they reached state review. She created a case file titled Benton Pattern of Civil Rights Violations. Into it, she dropped the video clip, Riker's misconduct history, Calkins' sealed dismissals, and the racial stop data from patrol logs. The file grew rapidly, evidence stacked on evidence. A story the sheriff's office had worked for years to keep hidden. Then she opened a secured chat with Denise Hampton, a federal prosecutor she trusted. No pleasantries, just the facts. "Denise, I've got an active civil rights crisis in Benton County. I was personally assaulted. I'm initiating federal inquiry authority under Title 18. I need you on standby for indictments." The reply came in seconds. "Understood. Send me the files. We'll prep charges tonight." Camila sent the link, then she leaned back, eyes closing briefly against the sharp throb in her leg. Outside, the teenage boy who filmed everything was still standing near the crates, phone in hand, looking unsure, waiting for some kind of sign. Camila opened the door, wincing slightly as she stepped out. "Make sure the world sees it," she told him, voice low but certain. The boy nodded, swallowing hard. "They already are, ma'am. They already are." And with that, she climbed back into her SUV, pulled onto Route 24, and headed toward the storm she had no choice but to face. Behind her, the first sparks of justice were already catching fire. The motel smelled like bleach and old regrets. Camila limped through the narrow hallway, the faded carpet muffling her steps. Room 207. She slid the key into the lock and pushed the door open with her shoulder, glistening as the pain in her leg flared again. The room was plain, no distractions, just a bed, a desk, and a humming mini-fridge that buzzed too loud in the silence. Exactly what she needed. She set her laptop on the desk and powered it up. The clock read 11:14 p.m. The night was thick and quiet outside, but inside her mind, the storm churned louder than ever. She started digging. Pulling every database she had access to, she traced Riker's career from day one. What she found was worse than she'd imagined. 4 prior complaints of excessive force, each filed by young men of color under 30. One claimed he was beaten during a traffic stop. Another said he was dragged from his car and slammed to the ground. Each case logged, processed, and dismissed. No action taken. Camila drilled deeper. Every complaint passed across the same desk before disappearing. Sheriff Linda Calkins, the elected sheriff of Benton County for 3 straight terms, re-elected twice without opposition, praised by local politicians as a pillar of public safety. But in the small print of the files, the truth lived quietly. She pulled up county commissioner voting records and campaign finance disclosures. There it was, a web of donors, real estate developers, private contractors, and campaign committees, all funneling money into Calkins' re-election campaigns. And in return, she protected her deputies, covered their misconduct, and silenced anyone who questioned her leadership. It wasn't incompetence, it was intent. Camila sat back, staring at the screen. The glow from the monitor lit her tired eyes. She'd seen this pattern before, in broken cities, corrupt precincts, failing systems that pretended to serve justice while protecting themselves. Riker was no lone wolf. He was a weapon, pointed and fired by a sheriff who knew exactly what kind of damage he would do. Camila rubbed her temples, her injured leg throbbing beneath the desk. She opened a blank document and titled it simply, Benton County Pattern of Abuse. Line by line, she began compiling evidence: complaint dates, witness statements, internal emails, body cam audit failures, and court filings. Each one another brick in a wall that Benton County thought it had built high enough to keep the truth out. But tonight, she was tearing it down. The air conditioning rattled overhead, cutting through the night heat. Camila didn't stop. She didn't sleep. With each passing minute, the web of corruption became clearer. It wasn't just Benton, it was a blueprint, one copied in towns across the country, where power hid behind badges and silence. But this was where she would break it. Because one truth was clear: if she didn't fight this now, no one else would. The deeper Camila dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Sheriff Linda Calkins wasn't just ignoring misconduct. She was protecting it, cultivating it, turning a blind eye when it served her power. Her influence stretched beyond the sheriff's office. County commissioners who rubber-stamped budget increases, business owners whose contracts expanded after donations, judges who dismissed excessive force cases on technicalities. Even the local news station avoided negative coverage of the sheriff's department, their board of directors heavily tied to Calkins' campaign donors. Camila cross-referenced the timeline. Every time Riker was accused of misconduct, the same series of events played out. A brief internal investigation, a closed-door meeting, a vague press release stating the matter was resolved, and then silence. No charges, no suspensions, no accountability. The complaints vanished into a file cabinet labeled Internal Review, never to see the light of day. She leaned back, staring at the tangled web on her screen. This wasn't sloppy oversight. It was a system designed to protect itself. Benton County wasn't broken by accident. It was built this way on purpose. Camila pulled up Sheriff Calkins' public appearances, speeches about law and order, photo ops with local church leaders, fundraising events framed as community safety initiatives. All of it carefully curated, all of it a mask hiding something rotten underneath. But the numbers didn't lie. Black drivers were stopped 3 times more often than white drivers in Benton County. Complaints from people of color were dismissed at twice the rate. Use of force incidents against minorities had risen steadily over the past 5 years. All under Calkins' watch. Camila's jaw clenched. This wasn't about a bad cop. It was about a sheriff who let bad cops thrive. A sheriff who silenced the victims and protected the perpetrators. She opened another secure channel and called Marcus Ellington. He answered groggily, voice low. Still at it? Riker's just the tip of it, she said, voice tight. Calkins built a wall around this department. Financial ties, political favors, judicial cover. It's a fortress of corruption. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing. You want to breach it? We're not breaching, she said coldly. We're burning it down. Understood, he said. I'll prep the federal oversight request. And Marcus, she added, her voice softer but firm. I'm naming her in the complaint. Personal liability. Won't be easy, he warned. She's got a lot of people in her pocket. It's about to have a lot more against her. Camila ended the call, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She stared at the sheriff's smiling face in a local election ad. The caption read, "Protecting Benton County's Values." Her stomach twisted. Protecting, yes, but only for some. She opened a blank federal misconduct form and began typing. It was time to drag this entire system into the light. Camila's fingers flew across the keyboard, each word a strike against the system that tried to bury her. She documented every detail in the federal misconduct case, the timeline of Riker's assaults, the complaints that vanish, the money trails that led to Calkins' door. But she didn't stop there. She added the systemic pattern: racial targeting, unlawful stops, and internal cover-ups. All with supporting data. This wasn't going to be dismissed as one officer's bad decision. It was going to be exposed as a culture of abuse. The cursor blinked at the end of her final sentence. She read it again, slow and steady, letting the weight of the words settle. Requesting immediate DOJ intervention and federal oversight of the Benton County Sheriff's Office under Title 18 Civil Rights Violations under color of law. Her injured leg throbbed beneath the desk, but she barely noticed now. Pain was background noise. She saved the file, encrypted it, and prepared the secure send to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. She hesitated for half a second, knowing what pressing send would mean. The moment she filed this case, she wouldn't just be fighting Benton County. She clicked send. There was no satisfaction in it, no relief, just the sharp clarity of purpose. She closed the laptop and sat back, rubbing her temples. She could feel the backlash already forming in the dark corners of the county. Retaliation would come. She would be labeled a troublemaker, an outsider stirring up old wounds. They'd come for her reputation, maybe even her career. But they'd made the first move when they thought they could kick her down in broad daylight. Now it was her turn. She reached for her phone again and opened a secure text thread with the FBI's legal counsel. The filing. Initiated. Prepare for public disclosure within 48 hours if stonewalled. A reply came quickly. Understood, standing by. Camila exhaled, slow and quiet. The night outside remained still, but she could feel the storm building in the distance. The sheriff's office would wake to a very different world tomorrow, one where silence was no longer their shield. She looked at the clock. 3:12 a.m. There would be no sleep tonight. She wasn't tired anyway. She stood slowly, bracing herself on the desk, the pain in her legs sharp but steady. They had underestimated her. They thought they could kick her down and walk away. But the truth doesn't stay buried. And by morning, Benton County would find out exactly what that meant. The first explosion hit just after 3:30 IL. Camila jolted awake, heart slamming against her ribs, as a deafening crack shattered the quiet night. She shot out of bed, legs screaming in protest, and stumbled to the window. What she saw pulled the breath from her lungs. Her black SUV, the same one Riker had sneered at, the same one she had driven across 1,000 miles of American backroads, was engulfed in flames. Bright orange tongues of fire curled through the windshield, devouring the dashboard, licking up the side mirrors. The hood crumpled in the heat, metal warping and popping like gunshots. Black smoke poured into the night sky, thick and suffocating. For a moment, the only thing she could hear was the crackle of burning fuel and the sharp pop of rubber melting from the tires. Her mind moved fast, slicing through the fear. Molotov cocktail, gasoline, ragwick thrown through the windshield. Crude but effective. A message written in fire. They knew where she was. They didn't care about subtlety anymore. Camila grabbed her phone and called Marcus Ellington. He answered on the second ring, his voice sharp with sleep, but clearer than most men wide awake. "They hit my car," she said, her tone flat but urgent. "Motel parking lot, firebomb." Benton County's playing for keeps now. Are you hurt? Marcus asked, already moving. No, just my pride. Local PD? They won't lift a finger, you know that. Stay inside, I'm 30 minutes out. And Cam, watch your 6. She ended the call and grabbed her go-bag from the nightstand. Her hands were steady now. There was no room left for fear, only focus. She pulled on jeans and a jacket over her bruised ribs, her mind working ahead of her body. This wasn't random violence. It was a calculated warning. Stay quiet, leave Benton, disappear. But they had made one critical mistake. They thought fire would scare her. All it did was ignite her. She stepped outside, smoke burning her throat. The flames illuminated the motel walls, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Sirens wailed in the distance, too late to matter. And then she saw it. Taped to a light pole near the edge of the lot, flapping slightly in the night breeze, was a piece of cardboard, thick black marker, 3 words, written in jagged, rushed letters. Stay in your lane. Camila stood there for a long moment, the heat of the fire warming her face. And then she smiled. Not the smile of someone amused. The smile of someone ready for war. The motel manager stood at a distance, robe cinched tight, phone clutched in both hands. He didn't come closer. Maybe he didn't want to know what kind of trouble burned so bright outside his front door. Maybe he already knew and wanted no part of it. Camila gave him a single nod of reassurance, then turned away before he could ask questions she wouldn't answer. The fire department arrived 10 minutes later, red lights swirling across the motel walls, cutting through the smoke like warning flares. Camila stood back as they worked, watching them douse the flames. But she didn't miss the way one of the younger firefighters cast a curious glance her way, as if already recognizing her from the video circulating online. Benton was waking up to a storm they couldn't contain. Her phone buzzed again. This time, Denise Hampton's name flashed across the screen. Federal prosecutor, trusted friend, and one of the few people who knew what kind of war was brewing. Camila answered without preamble. They burned my vehicle. I heard, Denise said, her voice low but steady. Social media's already buzzing. Locals are speculating it was an accident. Gas leak, electrical fire, anything but what it really was. Let them speculate, Camila replied. The truth will catch up soon enough. Denise didn't argue. I'm pushing for a DOJ security advisory. If they've escalated to this, they won't stop. Camila's voice was iron. Good. Let them come. I'm done waiting for them to knock. She hung up and watched as the fire crews wrapped their hoses, their job done. But the damage had already been done too. Her transportation was gone, a warning in flames. Marcus pulled into the lot 15 minutes later, in a battered government sedan, headlights sweeping across the charred remains of her SUV. He stepped out, eyes scanning the scene, jaw tight. They're scared, he said simply. Scared enough, Camila answered. Marcus handed her a second phone, encrypted, off the bureau's grid. You'll need this from here on out. We can't trust standard channels. Camila took it, sliding it into her pocket without comment. They stood there a moment longer in the cooling air, the smell of smoke lingering between them. This was no longer about Benton County. This was about power protecting itself, clawing back control with fire and fear. Retaliation started, Marcus said. Camila nodded once. Then we escalate too. Together, they got in the sedan and pulled away from the ruined lot. The motel lights faded behind them, swallowed by the night. Ahead, the fight waited, and Camila Brooks was driving straight into it. The sedan sped through dark back roads, headlights cutting a narrow path through fields and forgotten towns. Camila sat silent in the passenger seat, scrolling through fresh updates on her encrypted phone. The video of her assault was everywhere now, shared across social media pages, news blogs, and activist forums. Some headlines called it what it was. Federal officer has been misunderstanding. But the truth was out there, raw and undeniable. She opened a new secure thread to Marcus and Denise, laying out the next phase. We move fast. Surveillance, financial trails, back-channel witnesses. I want their entire power structure mapped out by sunrise, she typed. Marcus nodded beside her, eyes on the road, already tapping law enforcement union logs. Found one payment routed through a shell company connected to the sheriff's re-election fund. Denise replied seconds later, her message crisp. I'll prep a preliminary case brief for federal oversight. But Cam, you need to know, they're going to fight this tooth and nail. This isn't just local corruption, it's connected higher than we thought. Camila stared out the window, watching a lone diner sign flicker in the distance. Then, we pull harder. They stopped at a safe house outside Jefferson City, a one-story concrete bunker built during the Cold War, now used by federal task forces when cases went too hot for the main offices. Inside, the hum of old fluorescents buzzed overhead as Camila set up at the central desk. She connected her laptop, pulled in every database she could access without triggering alerts. County budget records, land development deals, security equipment contracts, each document piecing together a puzzle no one in Benton wanted the public to solve. The sheriff's office, it turned out, wasn't just protecting bad deputies. It was channeling county funds into surveillance contracts awarded to companies owned by political allies. Private security firms linked to campaign donors had been outfitting the sheriff's department with overpriced gear purchased with taxpayer dollars. And in return, protection, silence, loyalty. Camila laid out the web on her screen. Riker was a tool, Sheriff Calkins was a shield, but somewhere beyond them, someone was pulling strings too fine to be seen in public filings. She leaned back, exhaustion pressing against her ribs, but her mind sharper than ever. We need public pressure before they bury this, Camila said. We leak a controlled packet, just enough to make them sweat. Marcus cracked his knuckles, a tired smile at the corner of his mouth. Which outlet? She didn't hesitate. The same journalist who broke the last civil rights scandal in Kansas City. They'll trust him. An hour later, an encrypted file left the safe house, landing in the inbox of a reporter known for lighting matches in dark places. The story would break by morning. Camila stood by the window, watching the horizon turn gray. They thought burning my car would scare me, she said, her voice low. Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed. It was their first mistake. She nodded, eyes fixed on the rising light. Their second was leaving me standing. The war had started. But this time, Camila wasn't on defense. She was coming for them. By dawn, the plan was already in motion. Camila sat in the safe house, her laptop casting a pale glow across the dark room, typing out a message she knew would spread like wildfire through Benton's corrupt back channels. The bait was simple, believable, and sharp enough to draw blood. She drafted a leak on an encrypted forum frequented by law enforcement insiders and local political operatives. The message claimed she would be meeting a DOJ special investigator at 3 p.m. sharp in the old courthouse west of Benton, an abandoned relic no one had used in over a decade. The message said she would be bringing evidence, hard drives, transcripts, and financial ledgers that could bury half the sheriff's department. She knew they'd take the bait. Men like Riker and Calkins couldn't stand the thought of evidence slipping beyond their control. Fear made them reckless, and reckless was exactly what she needed. Marcus monitored the leak from a second terminal, watching as the message was copied, forwarded, and repeated through back channels. Within 2 hours, anonymous burner accounts started asking questions. What's she got? Is it legit? Do we hit it before or after she meets the DOJ? Camila leaned over Marcus' shoulder, reading the threads. They'll show up, she said. They won't send lawyers, they'll send guns. Marcus nodded grimly. Then we better have cameras rolling. They drove to the abandoned courthouse just after noon, The building loomed against the overcast sky, its stone facade cracked with age, weeds choking the steps. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and forgotten history. Camila and Marcus planted microcameras along the third-floor hallway, hidden in broken light fixtures and air vents. The cameras streamed directly to an encrypted feed, monitored by a federal surveillance team 2 miles away. They checked the angles twice, then once more for good measure. At 2:45 a.m., Marcus took his position across the street in a borrowed truck, binoculars in hand, watching the courthouse like a hawk. Camila stood alone in the hallway, laptop bag by her side, the bait in place. Her phone buzzed once. "Movement inbound," Marcus said. "Black SUV, no plates. 2, no. 3 guys, plain clothes, armed." Camila inhaled slowly, centering herself. "Let them come," she whispered. Minutes stretched like hours, as she heard the courthouse doors slam open below. Heavy boots echoed against the cracked marble floor. The voices of men who thought they owned this town bounced off the empty walls. And then, at the far end of the hallway, they appeared. 3 men, off-duty deputies, faces tight, hands hovering near their waistbands, ready to silence her before she could speak. They didn't know they were already caught. The lead deputy stepped forward first, boots grinding against the dust-covered tiles. His voice sliced through the still air, sharp and arrogant. "You think you can waltz into our town, drag our people through the mud and just walk away?" he sneered. Camila didn't flinch. She stood tall, her hands loose at her sides, calm as a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. "I don't walk away from the truth," she said. "You're the ones running from it." The second man laughed, low and cold, his hand resting near his belt, where a concealed weapon sat waiting. "You're all alone up here, lady. No cameras, no agents, just you, us, and a whole lot of quiet." They took another step closer, crowding the narrow hallway. The old courthouse groaned under the weight of the confrontation. Dust swirled in the sunlight, cutting through broken windows. Camila's heart pounded steady, but her face betrayed nothing. She knew Marcus was watching. She knew federal teams were standing by. But right now, all that mattered was holding the line. "You're making a mistake," she said, voice low and steady. "This entire building is wired. Every word you say, every step you take, it's all being recorded." But they didn't believe her. The third deputy, younger but no less dangerous, spat on the ground near her boots. "You're bluffing. Nobody's coming. Nobody cares." And in that moment, they made the fatal error. They stepped in closer, blocking her exit, their intent clear in their eyes. One reached out, grabbing the strap of her laptop bag, yanking it toward him. "Let's see what secrets you've got." And just as he pulled the bag from her hands, the first sound hit. Federal agents' boots pounding up the courthouse steps, shouts echoing through the stairwell. Federal agents, hands where we can see them. Chaos erupted in an instant. The deputies spun, reaching for weapons they would never have the chance to draw. Agents poured into the hallway from both ends, weapons raised, vests marked with bold FBI letters. Red laser sights danced across the walls. "Down! Get down now!" The first deputy froze, hands raised halfway before instinct kicked in, and he dropped to his knees. The second man cursed under his breath, but followed. The third, still holding Camila's bag, hesitated for one foolish second too long. A single warning shot cracked into the ceiling above his head. That was enough. He dropped the bag and fell to the floor, hands behind his head. Camila stood still, her breath finally exhaling as the moment broke. Federal agents cuffed the men swiftly, reading their rights as they were led away, scowling and defeated. Hidden cameras captured every second, the threats, the assault, the takedown. It was all there. Proof of their intent, evidence of their corruption. And outside, where Marcus watched from the truck, a slow smile crossed his face. The trap had worked. The aftermath unfolded fast. Agents swept the courthouse, clearing every floor, every corner. Camila stood near the broken window, watching as the last of the deputies were loaded into unmarked federal vehicles. Their faces, pale with shock, no longer carried the smug certainty they had walked in with. Marcus crossed the street and climbed the courthouse steps, his coat whipping in the breeze. He met Camila at the top of the stairwell, his expression a mixture of relief and quiet respect. "They didn't see it coming," he said. "They never do," Camila replied, brushing dust from her jacket. Her legs still throbbed, but the pain didn't slow her. Not today. Minutes later, the encrypted footage from the hidden cameras uploaded automatically to the Bureau's secure servers. But Camila wasn't done. She clipped a 30-second segment, just enough to show the deputies threatening her, just enough to show their weapons, and sent it to the same journalist who broke the story of her assault. This time the narrative shifted instantly. It wasn't just a rogue deputy kicking a black woman in a parking lot. It was an organized crew of law enforcement officers ambushing a federal agent on American soil. And this time, the world was watching in real time. The story exploded across every major news outlet. Headlines screamed across phone screens within the hour. Corrupt Benton deputies caught in FBI sting. Federal agent ambushed in courthouse confrontation. Sheriff's office cover-up crumbles as deputies arrested. Social media erupted. The footage circulated faster than they could contain it, stitched with captions calling for resignations, indictments, and federal oversight. Hashtags trended worldwide. Benta Bromelin. Back at the safe house, Camila reviewed the raw footage one more time. The look in their eyes when the agents burst through the doors. Panic, disbelief, and fear. She knew that look. She had seen it in cartel leaders, in traffickers, in corrupt judges. People who thought they were untouchable until the floor gave way beneath them. Marcus placed a fresh cup of coffee beside her. "You did it," he said, voice quiet in the hum of equipment. "You dragged them into the light." Camila shook her head, her eyes still fixed on the screen. "This is just the first crack. We still have to bring down the ones who sent them, so there will be less of them." He leaned against the desk, watching her work. "Sheriff Calkins is next." "You built this empire," Camila said. "It's time to burn it down." And then, as if on cue, her secure phone buzzed again. Denise Hampton's voice came through, tense but sharp. "Camila, you just triggered a firestorm. Calkins is holding a press conference at noon. Word is, she's going to deny everything, paint herself as the victim of a political witch hunt." Camila smiled faintly. "Good, let her talk. Every word will be another nail in her coffin." She ended the call and stood, stretching the tension from her shoulders. The courthouse ambush had set the stage. Now it was time for the next act. They would try to spin it. They would try to bury it. But the evidence was already loose in the world, and no amount of spin could stop the truth from spreading. As the first rays of afternoon sunlight streamed through the safe house windows, Camila gathered her files, zipped up her jacket, and prepared for the next fight. Because the storm she had unleashed was only just beginning. By mid-morning, the Benton County Sheriff's Office was under siege, only this time, the invaders carried clipboards, subpoenas, and federal badges. DOJ investigators swarmed the building like locusts, sweeping through offices, confiscating hard drives, and pulling personnel files that had gathered dust for years. Deputies scrambled to cover their tracks, shredding noticings, whispering names, but it was too late. The system they built to protect themselves was collapsing brick by brick. Sheriff Linda Calkins stood at the center of the chaos, her crisp uniform now a poor disguise, for the fear creeping behind her eyes. She issued orders no one followed, barked commands that bounced off the cold tile floors like empty echoes. Her kingdom was falling, and no one was left to catch her. At noon sharp, she stepped in front of a hastily arranged press conference outside the courthouse steps. Flashbulbs popped, Microphones jutted forward like spears. Her face, so composed in campaign posters, now looked pale and defensive. I want to be clear, she began, voice tight. These accusations are politically motivated. My office has always upheld the highest standards of law enforcement and community service. But the crowd didn't buy it. Reporters shouted over each other, demanding answers she wasn't prepared to give. What about the deputies caught threatening a federal agent? Are you denying the financial ties to private contractors? Were misconduct complaints repeatedly dismissed under your leadership? Calkins deflected, spinning a narrative of outside interference, rogue agents, and media sensationalism, but the cracks showed. Her voice wavered, her eyes darted. And across town, Camila watched the live broadcast from the safe house, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Spinning, Marcus said beside her. But the walls are closing in. Camila nodded. She still thinks she can contain this. She doesn't realize the fire's already spread to the top. She turned back to her files, scrolling past the sheriff's public donations and official statements. Buried deep in the campaign finance disclosures, under layers of LLCs and PAC, she found what she was looking for. A name. Everett Grayson. Retired state senator, former police chief, political kingmaker. He wasn't just an ally, he was the architect. And now, the hunt would climb one level higher. Camila leaned forward, eyes narrowing as she read through Grayson's financial footprint. For years, he had positioned himself as a retired public servant, hosting charity galas, funding youth programs, speaking at law enforcement banquets across the state. But beneath that polished image, the money told a different story. Grayson had been quietly funneling funds into Benton County for nearly a decade. He bankrolled Sheriff Calkins' re-election campaigns through a network of shell companies, each one tied to private security firms and prison management corporations. Contracts for county jail upgrades, body armor purchases, and surveillance equipment all traced back to donors in Grayson's inner circle. But it wasn't just financial, it was power. He had leveraged his former position as a state senator to block oversight measures, ensuring that Calkins and her deputies operated without fear of consequence. Every time a misconduct complaint rose through the channels, it died on a committee he once chaired or through legislation he helped draft. Camila scrolled through emails, invoices, and donor logs, the threads weaving into a picture too large to ignore. This wasn't just Benton County. It was a small piece of a much bigger machine, a machine designed to keep power in the hands of a few while silencing those who dared question it. She shared the files with Marcus, who sat beside her, brow furrowed. "It's been playing both sides," Marcus muttered. "Champion of public safety on paper, puppet master of corruption behind the curtain. And no one questioned it because the system worked for them," Camila said flatly. Marcus sighed, rubbing his temple. "How do you want to play this?" "We confront it head-on," she said. "If we try to negotiate or threaten him privately, he'll bury it before sunset." "We go public?" Camila shook her head. "Not yet. First, we give him a chance to show his hand." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're going to call him?" She nodded. "Grayson respects strength. If I go silent, he'll think I'm afraid. If I confront him, he'll either try to cut a deal or make a mistake." Marcus hesitated but trusted her judgment. "I'll trace the call." Camila opened a secure line and dialed the number listed on one of Grayson's private donor contact sheets. It rang twice before a smooth, confident voice answered. "Brooks," Grayson said without introduction. "I've been expecting you." His tone was casual, almost amused, like they were discussing a golf game rather than the unraveling of his empire. "You know why I'm calling," Camila said, her voice steady. "I do," he replied easily. "And I imagine you're hoping for some kind of resolution before this all spirals beyond control." Control was lost when your deputies ambushed me in a courthouse, she shot back. A pause, then a chuckle. Ah, so you're going to play the wounded hero. Careful, Agent Brooks. The system you're shaking doesn't collapse without casualties. Camila let the silence hang for a beat. Then you'd better pray you're not standing under it when it falls. For the first time, his voice cooled. Watch your step, Agent. She ended the call without another word. Marcus looked at her. So? She stared at the phone, jaw tight. He just declared war. Camila didn't waste time. Within minutes, she gathered every document tying Grayson's money to Sheriff Calkins' office. Campaign contributions disguised as public safety grants, inflated contracts for private prison services, payments routed through security companies that never delivered equipment. It wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. She drafted a comprehensive evidence packet. Every invoice, every wire transfer, every donor name that funneled dirty money into Benton County's hands, and at the center of it all, Everett Grayson's signature, quiet and calculated. Marcus reviewed the files beside her, his jaw tightening with every new piece of evidence. "You're going to leak this?" he asked. Camila nodded. "Not yet. First, I want to give Grayson a chance to spin himself into a corner." Simple, she said, her voice calm. "We'll let him think he still has a shot to control the narrative." They prepared a controlled leak, a small taste of the financial connections, just enough to rattle Grayson's allies, but not enough to burn him completely. Marcus sent it anonymously to 3 national journalists and 1 local reporter with a reputation for stirring political controversy. By morning, the headlines exploded. Her office, funded by political dark money, private prisons, public paychecks, Benton County's hidden contracts. The sheriff's press office scrambled to respond, issuing vague denials and promises of transparency. But the damage was done. Eyes were no longer just on Calkin. They were climbing the ladder, tracing the rot to its highest branch. Grayson responded the only way men like him knew how, through backroom deals. He called a closed-door meeting with state legislators, campaign donors, and law enforcement union leaders. Camila's sources fed her every detail. Grayson urged them to circle the wagons, to present a unified front against what he called a federal overreach. He promised favors, jobs, and campaign funding if they kept quiet and stayed loyal. But the meeting was recorded. One of his own aides, tired of the lie, slipped Camila the audio file, and in it, Grayson's voice was crystal clear. "We bury this now, or we all burn together." Camila played the clip on a loop, each word another nail in his coffin. She sent it to Denise Hampton, the federal prosecutor who had been waiting for this moment. "Let's move," Camila wrote. Denise replied with a single word, "Done." Within hours, Camila leaked the full financial records, the wire transfers, and the audio of Grayson's backroom deal to the same journalists who had broken the first stories. She didn't wait for their approval, she just pressed send. The media firestorm erupted instantly. Grayson's office went silent, his social media scrubbed overnight. Donors fled, lawmakers distanced themselves. What had once been a towering pyramid of power now looked like a house of cards, swaying in the wind. And for the first time, Sheriff Calkins was nowhere to be found. Her office locked, her phone off. The Queen had fallen silent. Camila stood at the window of the safe house as the news rolled in. Reporters called for interviews. Politicians demanded resignations. Protesters filled the streets of Benton, holding signs that read, "Burn the pyramid, break the chain." Marcus walked up beside her, coffee in hand. "You just pulled the roof down." Camila's voice was quiet, but unyielding. "Good. Now let's finish the job." The knock on Sheriff Calkins' front door came at 5:47 a.m. Sharp, loud, undeniable. Not the gentle knock of courtesy, but the kind that lets you know your time is up. She opened the door in a worn bathrobe, face pale, hair disheveled, caught between sleep and a nightmare she couldn't escape. Flashing badges greeted her, cold and clear. Sheriff Linda Calkins, you are under arrest for conspiracy to obstruct justice, abuse of power, and violation of civil rights under federal law. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment she tried to summon the steel voice that had once silenced courtrooms and crushed dissent, but the words wouldn't come. Not now. Federal agents cuffed her hands in front of her stunned husband and a sleepy neighborhood that would never see her the same again. Camera flashes burst from the bushes. Reporters who had camped out overnight captured every second. By the time she was placed in the back of the black SUV, her name was already trending on every major news site in the country. Miles across town, the same scene unfolded in Deputy Kyle Riker's driveway. He stumbled outside, boots half-laced, shirt untucked, disbelief etched across his face as federal marshals surrounded his front lawn. He tried to bark orders, tried to bluff his way out, but no one listened anymore. Deputy Kyle Riker, you are under federal arrest for assault on a federal officer, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and multiple civil rights violations. He sneered, spit on the ground, and muttered, "This is political." But no one cared. He was cuffed before the sun finished rising. News helicopters circled overhead. Neighbors watched from porches, some in silence, others in quiet vindication. They'd seen his boots stomp through their streets for years. Now they watched him stumble. By mid-morning, the Benton County Courthouse was surrounded by cameras and protesters. Every local channel, every national network live-streamed the unfolding reckoning. The once untouchable power players of Benton were being walked into federal custody, heads down, shoulders tight. Camila watched from the courthouse steps, standing tall against the gray morning sky. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't victory. It was accountability. And accountability wasn't clean. It was messy, painful, long overdue. Marcus stood beside her, quietly monitoring the unfolding arrests. Denise joined them moments later, her face calm but watchful. "The badge would protect them," Camila said softly. Denise nodded. Turns out the law runs deeper than their reach. As the last of the arrested officers were loaded into waiting vans, the crowd outside the courthouse began to swell. Signs waved above the heads of Benton citizens: "Justice for all," "Clean the system," and "No more signs." The air felt different now, like the first breath after a long storm. Camila took a step forward, ready to speak. But first she paused, letting the gravity of the moment settle, because this wasn't just about Benton anymore. It was the beginning of something much larger. Camila stepped up to the microphones, facing a sea of cameras and eyes filled with anger, hope, and disbelief. The courthouse steps, once a fortress of silence, now became a stage for truth. Her voice cut through the morning air, Michael and fierce. What happened in Benton County is not an isolated incident. This is not one bad deputy or one corrupt sheriff. This is what happens when a system protects itself at the expense of the people it's sworn to serve. The crowd quieted, hanging on every word. For years, complaints were dismissed. Victims were ignored. Power was hoarded in the hands of a few, while ordinary people paid the price. What happened to me is not the story. It is the symptom. The story is bigger. The story is Benton County didn't have a few bad apples. Benton County had a spoiled orchard. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Reporters scrambled to jot down her words. She continued, her tone unwavering. "This morning I filed an official civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice against the Benton County Sheriff's Office. This complaint includes violations of Title 18, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power under color of law." The weight of those words settled over the crowd like a thunderclap. Federal investigation has begun, but the work doesn't stop with arrests. It doesn't stop with headlines. Accountability must reach every corner of this system. Every courtroom, every patrol car, every office where silence has been policy. A single protester near the front shouted, "Break the system!" and others followed, voices rising, fists lifted. Camila let the moment breathe, then added one final thought. Benton County will not define me, but it will remember me, because today we are taking back what they thought they could steal forever: justice. The crowd erupted, the courthouse steps shaking beneath the roar. Cameras captured it all. Across the nation, millions watched as a woman, once kicked to the gravel, stood taller than the institution that tried to break her. Marcus stepped forward, placing a protective hand near her shoulder, scanning the crowd for threats. Denise nodded from the side, her face unreadable but proud. Camila turned slightly, facing the federal agents standing at the courthouse doors. "Prepare the task force," she said quietly. "This isn't over, this is just the first wave." Inside, the paperwork moved faster than anyone expected. Sealed indictments, search warrants for county commissioners' offices, financial audits of the jail contracts. The system was hemorrhaging, and the nation was watching. By noon, the story had overtaken every other headline in America. Benton County, once a forgotten name on a dusty map, was now the epicenter of a civil rights reckoning. And Camila Brooks stood at the heart of it, not as a victim, but as the force that cracked it open. The ripple effect was immediate. By sunset, protests erupted in cities far beyond Benton: Kansas City, St. Louis, Chicago, Atlanta. Black Lives Matter organizers and civil rights activists rallied alongside everyday citizens, holding signs that echoed Camila's words: "Not a bad apple, a spoiled orchard." Local politicians scrambled to rewrite their talking points. Some condemned Sheriff Calkins and Deputy Riker outright. Others tried to distance themselves from the storm, claiming they had no knowledge of the corruption, even as public records showed their donations and endorsements. Senator Everett Grayson's office went dark. He issued no statement, gave no interviews, and canceled his upcoming appearances. But his name trended on every social media platform, alongside words like "cover up," "dirty money," and "complicity." Anonymous sources whispered that federal subpoenas were already inbound. Camila watched it all unfold from the FBI's temporary field office, her leg propped up on a chair, ice wrapped tight around her shin. The pain lingered, but so did the purpose. She knew this wasn't a victory lap. This was triage on a broken system. Marcus pulled up the latest intel. DOJ's dispatching oversight teams to other counties. Missouri's governor just called for an emergency ethics review. Denise entered the room, tablet in hand. "And the Senate Judiciary Committee wants you to testify next week." Camila exhaled slowly. "Of course they do." For a brief moment, silence settled over the room. Not exhaustion, clarity. "We knew this was bigger than Benton," Camila said, her voice soft but steady. "Now the rest of the country knows it too." She stood, ignoring the ache in her body, and crossed to the whiteboard where they had mapped out the sheriff's network. But now, new names filled the edges of the map. Other counties, other officials, a pattern stretching far wider than one town. "This won't stop with a few arrests," Camila said. "Power doesn't surrender. It shifts. It hides. It waits." Marcus nodded. "Then we don't stop either." Camila marked the next target on the board: another county. Another sheriff's office with complaints buried under paperwork. She faced Marcus and Denise, her voice low and resolute. "Let's keep digging." And in that quiet room, far from the noise of cameras and protests, they got back to work. Because the fight for justice wasn't a headline. It was a lifetime. And Camila Brooks wasn't finished yet. The deeper Camila dug, the more tangled the roots became. For days, she and Marcus combed through encrypted messages, anonymous tips, and hidden surveillance files. What they found stopped them cold. In the shadows of a dimly lit storage facility on the outskirts of Benton, a single grainy camera caught what no one was supposed to see. There, under flickering lights and surrounded by crates of surveillance equipment, three familiar figures gathered: Sheriff Linda Calkins, Deputy Kyle Riker, and Senator Everett Grayson. No badges, no press, just power. The footage showed them hunched over a table stacked with burner phones, campaign spreadsheets, and media response templates. They weren't discussing law enforcement strategy. They were plotting narrative control. Grayson instructed Calkins on which outlets to feed with false leaks. Riker bragged about suppressing body cam footage. Calkins laid out how to pressure local judges into dismissing complaints before they ever reached a jury. Camila's stomach twisted as she watched Grayson lean in, his voice just clear enough on the grainy audio. We control the media. We control the outrage. Let her scream. Let her file complaints. By the time she finishes, the public will already have moved on. But that wasn't the worst part. In the final minutes of the video, another name surfaced. A name Camila hadn't seen before, but one that sent a chill through the room. "Vincent's covering the financials," Grayson said flatly. "We don't need to get our hands dirty. He'll handle the cleanup if this thing spills over." Vincent. Marcus froze beside her. "Vincent Hargrove?" Camila nodded, her pulse hammering. "The private contractor, former military intelligence. He's the one behind the security firms funding this entire operation." They ran his file. Vincent Hargrove wasn't just some faceless donor. He was the architect, the man who built the surveillance networks, staffed the sheriff's office with private security consultants, and funneled federal grant money into personal coffers. He wasn't elected, and he didn't wear a badge, but his reach extended further than any sheriff or senator. And when Camila traced the payments, the picture sharpened. Hargrove's companies had quietly financed online smear campaigns against her, fake social media accounts spreading rumors that she'd staged her own assault, false narratives accusing her of weaponizing her position for personal gain. Every attack, every leak, it all traced back to him. Camila leaned back in her chair, exhaling slow and hard. "He tried to erase me before I could reach him." Marcus stared at the screen, then met her eyes. "So what now? You leak this?" She shook her head. "No, not yet. First, I want to look him in the eye." Marcus hesitated. "That's dangerous, Cam." "Exactly." She stood, pulling on her jacket, her voice cold and sharp. "Let's see how brave the architect is when the house starts burning." They found Vincent Hargrove exactly where the whispers said he'd be, hidden behind layers of security, in a mansion perched on the cliffs of Gulf Shores. The kind of place that didn't show up on public maps. A fortress of glass and steel, surrounded by cameras, motion sensors, and a private security detail that looked ex-military. Camila and Marcus drove through the night, silence filling the gaps between the hum of the tires and the pounding questions in their minds. No backup, no official clearance, just a flash drive packed with evidence and a confrontation waiting to happen. When they reached the gate, Camila stepped out first, alone. She pressed the intercom, steadying her breath. The camera blinked red, scanning her face. A low voice crackled through the speaker. "Brooks, I was wondering when you'd stop hiding behind your badge." "Richard Hargrove." His voice was smooth, unbothered, the tone of a man who had controlled shadows for decades. The gate opened without another word. She walked the winding stone path alone, past manicured hedges and imported statues. The house rose before her, all sharp edges and cold perfection. Inside, it smelled like money and quiet power. Vincent greeted her in the foyer, glass of whiskey in hand, dressed like a man hosting a casual dinner, not facing federal exposure. "Welcome to the top of the food chain," he said with a smile. "I assume you've come for answers or revenge?" Camila stood still, her face unreadable. "I've come to make a deal." He laughed softly, walking toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. "You think you have leverage?" "I know I do." She pulled the flash drive from her jacket and placed it on the sleek marble table between them. Surveillance footage, financial records, wire transfers tying you to Calkins, Grayson, and Riker. Plus the contractors you placed in 3 other counties I haven't exposed yet." Vincent's smile didn't fade, but his eyes sharpened. "And what do you want?" "Simple," Camila said, her voice low and firm. "If anything happens to me, this drive goes public. If I disappear, if my team is harmed, if you try to smear me again, it all goes live. Every file, every detail, internationally." She paused, letting the weight of the threat settle. "This doesn't stop my investigation, but it stops your interference." Vincent swirled his drink, silent for a moment. Then he placed the glass down carefully. "You've made a lot of enemies, Agent Brooks. You sure you can handle the fallout?" She met his gaze without blinking. "I'm still standing, aren't I?" He chuckled, low and dry. "For now." A long silence stretched between them. Neither blinked, neither moved. Finally, Vincent gave a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement of the new rules. "Fine," he said. "You've bought yourself time, but understand this. Power doesn't die. It adapts. You haven't won. You've just slowed us down." Camila turned to leave, her voice calm but sharp. "That's all I need." As she walked back down the marble hallway, the sun began to rise over the water, casting long shadows behind her. Marcus waited at the car, watching her approach. "Well?" he asked. She slid into the passenger seat, exhaling slow. He blinked. The drive back from Gulf Shores was long and quiet, the kind of quiet that carried weight. Camila stared out at the winding coastline, her mind still running through the possibilities. She had confronted the architect, but the foundation of his empire still stood. For now, by the time they crossed back into Missouri, the headlines had already shifted. National outlets buzzed with questions about Vincent Hargrove's companies, private prison kickbacks, and the sudden collapse of Sheriff Calkins's power structure. Anonymous sources fed whispers to journalists, but none dared name the man Camila had just faced. She didn't need to out him publicly yet. The threat of exposure was more valuable than the exposure itself. Back at the safe house, Denise was waiting, arms crossed, laptop open. She looked up as they entered, concern flickering across her face. "You went to see him?" Camila nodded, dropping her jacket over the chair. "I had to." Denise sighed, but didn't argue. "What's the fallout?" Camila leaned against the desk, exhaustion finally creeping into her bones. "Temporary truce. He won't touch us for now. But this is far from over." Marcus sat down beside them, pulling up the latest intel. Grayson's lawyers are scrambling, Calkins is in federal holding, and Riker's already trying to cut a deal. But none of them have mentioned Hargrove yet. He's still invisible to the public. Camila nodded slowly. That's how men like him survive, in the shadows. She pulled out a separate flash drive, one she hadn't left at Hargrove's mansion. This one contained the rest of the story. Names, accounts, contracts. A complete blueprint of the machine Hargrove had built. "The time is right," she said quietly. "We burn it all." For now, though, the quiet war paused. A thin line of uneasy peace stretched between her and the empire she'd cracked open. The next morning, Camila stood alone on the steps of the Benton courthouse. No cameras, no crowd, just her and the ghost of what had been exposed. She looked out across the empty square, wind tugging at the edges of her coat. The system wasn't gone, but now it was exposed. And sometimes that was the first step toward breaking it. Camila turned and walked away, her footsteps steady, her resolve sharper than ever. The war wasn't over, but she was still standing. And she wasn't done. The gravel crunched beneath Camila's boots as she stepped out of the rental car, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the faded pumps of the old gas station. It looked smaller now, quieter. The cracked lot where it all began still bore the scars of time, but something had changed. Not the paint or the rusted sign overhead, but the story the ground carried. She walked slowly toward pump number 3, The place where Kyle Riker's boot had knocked her to the ground. The place where a quiet injustice turned into a national reckoning. Her knee still ached from the impact, though the bruises had faded. Some wounds never truly left. At the edge of the lot, by a patch of wildflowers growing through the cracks, she saw it. A small bronze plaque, weathered but bold. Someone had planted it there without fanfare, without ceremony. Its words simple, powerful. Here stood a woman. She didn't fall. Camila stared at the plaque for a long time, her throat tight. Wind rustled through the nearby pine trees, and for a moment, the world felt still. She didn't smile, but a quiet peace settled over her. This was where it all changed. But it wasn't where it ended. A teenage boy approached cautiously from the side of the lot. She recognized him instantly, the kid who had filmed the assault, the one who had turned fear into evidence. He looked older now, but his eyes still carried that mixture of curiosity and courage. "You came back," he said softly. Camila nodded, had to see it one more time. He shifted his weight awkwardly. "People still talk about it, you know. What happened here? What you did." Camila gave him a small nod. "What we did." The boy smiled shyly, then held up his phone. "Want me to take a picture? For, I don't know, history or something?" Camila hesitated, then shook her head. "No, some things don't need pictures, just memory." He lowered the phone, understanding. As the wind picked up again, Camila placed her hand gently on the plaque. It was cool beneath her palm, solid and unmoving. She whispered, almost to herself, "This was just the beginning." Then she turned, walking back toward the car, leaving behind the plaque, the pump, and the dust of a battle that had lit a fire across the nation. Ahead, the road stretched wide and open, and somewhere beyond the horizon, another fight waited. Days later, in a quiet federal building far from Benton, Camila sat across from the FBI director. The walls were lined with certificates, American flags, and silent reminders of duty. But today, none of it felt like home. The director's voice was measured, almost gentle. "You sure about this, Camila? You could stay. Lead the new task force. We need people like you on the inside." Camila looked down at the resignation letter in front of her, typed, signed, and final. She'd thought long and hard about this moment, about what it meant to leave the badge behind, but the truth was clear. Her fight wasn't in a federal office anymore. It was out there, in the cracks and shadows where power hides when no one's watching. "I served 26 years, she said quietly, "and I'm proud of every single one. But I can't fight this battle with a badge anymore. I need both hands free." The director sighed, respecting the weight of her words. "You'll have enemies out there." She gave a small, tired smile. "I've already got them. Now I'll face them head on." With that she stood, shook his hand, and walked out without looking back. The badge that had once defined her life now sat on the director's desk, gleaming quietly in the afternoon light. Word of her resignation spread fast. Headlines called it a shock. Pundits debated whether it was victory or defeat. But Camila knew it was neither. It was transition. Almost immediately, she began speaking across the country, at universities, civil rights forums, law enforcement conferences. Not for fame, but for truth. She told her story with raw honesty, sharing the failures of a system too often shielded by its own power. She pushed for legislative reforms, independent oversight boards, whistleblower protections, and federal tracking of civil rights complaints. Some politicians fought her, others listened, but no one could ignore her. Senate hearings followed, where Camila testified about the layers of corruption in Benton and beyond. She laid bare the financial ties between sheriffs, contractors, and politicians who had sold public safety for profit. And in those chambers she spoke the words that would echo far beyond their marble walls. Justice doesn't fail because of one corrupt officer. It fails because we allow silence to protect them. Benton was not unique. Benton was exposed. Slowly, change began. A National Accountability Task Force was established. States passed new transparency laws. Small towns reviewed their sheriff's departments, finding rot they'd ignored for decades. And across Missouri, dozens of officials quietly resigned, unwilling to face the scrutiny Camila's story had unleashed. But even in victory, she knew the fight wasn't finished. Somewhere out there, another Riker waited. Another Calkins sat behind a desk, covering tracks in the dark. And Vincent Hargrove's empire, though rattled, was far from destroyed. But for the first time, Camila wasn't alone in the fight. Communities, activists, and good officers stood beside her. And together they had turned a dusty gas station assault into a national reckoning. Weeks later, Camila found herself on a different kind of battlefield. Not in a courtroom or a crime scene, but standing before a packed auditorium filled with young law students, community organizers, and everyday people searching for answers. The lights dimmed slightly as she stepped up to the podium. She didn't read from notes. She didn't need to. She spoke from scars. When I stood on that gravel lotta, bleeding and alone, I wasn't thinking about making history. I was thinking about survival, about making it home that night. What came after? That wasn't heroism. That was necessity. Because when power knocks you down, you only have two choices: stay down or stand back up and tear down the hands that pushed you. The room was silent, not out of shock, but out of respect. She looked out over the crowd, seeing herself in so many of their faces. The young woman in the third row clutching a notebook, the older man near the back wiping a tear, the activist in the aisle seat, fists clenched, ready to take the baton. Apparatus corruption doesn't end because we caught a few bad apples. It ends when we refuse to let the orchard stay rotten. It ends when we stop waiting for someone else to fix it. Thunderous applause filled the auditorium, but Camila only smiled faintly. She wasn't here for praise. She was here to light the next spark. That night, back in her quiet apartment, she sat alone with the television muted. News crawls spoke of reform bills passing in state legislatures, of new investigations opening in counties that once thought they were untouchable, but she knew better than to celebrate too soon. The machine she had fought didn't vanish. It reassembled. It shifted gears, changed faces, and found new ways to survive. Somewhere, a new sheriff was learning how to bend the rules without getting caught. Somewhere else, a young deputy watched his supervisor cover up misconduct and wondered if that was just how things worked. But now, at least, they knew they were being watched. Camila opened her laptop, scanning new reports, whistleblower messages, and leads from across the country. The battle stretched far wider than Benton. It always had. She poured herself a cup of coffee and smiled softly, not out of joy, but out of resolve. Because the storm didn't end at the gas station. It didn't end with a resignation letter or an indictment. The storm moved, and she moved with it. Across the nation, ripples of her story carried on. School children debated civil rights cases in classrooms. Community leaders organized town halls. Journalists followed money trails they used to ignore. And somewhere out there, in a courthouse or a gas station, or a dusty town square, another fight was waiting. Camila closed her laptop, pulled on her jacket, and stepped out into the night. Because this fight was never about winning once. It was about standing every time they told you to sit down. The wind caught her hair as she walked down the street, phone buzzing with a new tip. Another town, another name. She smiled faintly to herself. Let's get to work. And just like that, the storm rolled on,